The streets of Manila were alive with noise, honking jeepneys painted in wild colors, vendors calling out their goods, and children darting between cars with baskets of peanuts and flowers. But amid the chaos, there was a sound that made people pause. A voice. It was the voice of a boy no older than 12, barefoot and thin, standing near the corner of a crowded marketplace. His name was Arnold, and though he had no microphone, no stage, and no spotlight, he sang as if the world itself was listening. Arnold's shirt was faded, its fabric stretched thin from years of hand-me-down wear. His shorts barely clung to his hips, patched up by his mother's careful sewing. His face was tired, older than his years, yet his eyes, deep, dark pools, still held a spark. When he opened his mouth, the spark became fire. People passing by often slowed down. Some tossed coins into the empty plastic cup at his feet, others simply stood still for a moment, forgetting their busy errands. His voice was raw, untrained, but it carried something far more powerful than technique. It carried truth. Behind him, just a few steps away, sat a woman on a small wooden stool. She was thin too, her hands resting on her lap, her back curved with exhaustion. This was his mother Maria, who once worked as a laundress before illness stole her strength. She watched her son sing with pride, but also with quiet heartbreak. She knew why he was there. Every peso Arnold earned went to rice, medicine, and sometimes, if they were lucky, a little bread from the corner bakery. He was a child who should have been in school, reading books, and playing games with friends, but instead, he carried the weight of survival on his small shoulders. Arnold never complained. He had learned early that complaining did not fill an empty stomach. Instead, he poured every hunger pang, every worry, and every dream into his songs. He sang love songs, folk songs, sometimes American pop hits he learned by listening outside karaoke bars. He didn't always know the words, but he sang them anyway, shaping them with his heart. When people asked him why he sang, he always gave the same answer: for my mom. Maria often whispered apologies to her son. I'm sorry, Anak, you deserve more than this. But Arnold always shook his head. You gave me life, mama. Now let me give you hope. It was not just words, he meant them. On good days, when his cup filled with coins, he would rush home to buy food. He always let his mother eat first, insisting he wasn't hungry until her plate was clean. On bad days, when only a few coins clinked against the plastic, they would share a single banana between them. Yet even then, before going to sleep on their thin mattress laid across a wooden floor, Arnold would hum quietly, his voice comforting his mother like a lullaby. Sometimes, strangers stopped to ask about him. They couldn't understand how so much soul lived inside such a small boy. One old man who heard him sing once said, "That child, he sings like he's lived 100 lifetimes." And in many ways, he had. Poverty forces children to grow fast, to understand struggle and sacrifice long before they should. Still, in the middle of hardship, music was Arnold's light. It was not just survival, it was expression. Every note he sang seemed to rise above the smoky streets and tangled electric wires, reaching for something greater, something beyond Manila's crowded alleys. But what few people knew was that his songs weren't just for coins, they were prayers. Each time Arnold closed his eyes and sang, he prayed silently. He prayed for his mother's health, for her pain to go away, for a roof that didn't leak when it rained, for shoes that didn't hurt when he walked too far. And though he never said it aloud, deep in his heart, he also prayed for a chance, just one chance, to show the world what his voice could do. That chance seemed impossible. After all, who would notice a poor boy on the corner of a Manila market? Yet life has a way of listening to prayers sung with sincerity. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Arnold sang a ballad his mother used to hum when she still had strength. His voice cracked with emotion, but he didn't stop. Tears welled in Maria's eyes as she listened. She wished she could stand up and shield him from the world, from the pitying stares and the harsh reality of poverty. But all she could do was watch, and believe in him. That night, Arnold returned home with just enough coins to buy rice. He boiled it carefully, served his mother first, and ate the little that was left. Afterward, he sat by the window of their small shanty, looking out at the blinking city lights in the distance. He could hear the faint sounds of karaoke bars where people sang for fun, for laughter. He closed his eyes and whispered, "One day, Momo, I'll sing on a real stage, and when I do, you'll never have to worry again." His mother reached out, weak but smiling, and touched his hand. "I believe you, Anak," she whispered. In that moment, Arnold wasn't just a poor Filipino boy singing for coins. He was a dreamer with a voice strong enough to break through walls of poverty, fear, and doubt. His story had only begun. And though he didn't know it yet, someone was about to hear him sing. Someone who would change his life forever. The marketplace had always been Arnold's stage. Day after day, the same cracked pavement beneath his bare feet, the same background chorus of honking jeepneys and hurried footsteps. But fate, like music, often begins with a single unexpected note. It happened on a humid afternoon when Arnold's voice carried through the crowded stalls more powerfully than usual. He was singing an old ballad, his eyes closed, his hands clenched tightly around the air as though squeezing the meaning from every lyric. A foreign tourist, camera slung over his neck, paused. Unlike most passers-by who dropped a coin and moved along, this man stayed. He raised his phone and began to record. At first Arnold didn't notice. He was lost in the song, pouring out every ounce of emotion. But when the music ended and the man clapped softly, Arnold's eyes fluttered open. "Boy," the man said gently in English, kneeling down. "That voice, it's a gift." Arnold smiled shyly, not fully understanding, but the warmth in the man's tone was enough. The man dropped a bill into Arnold's cup, more than he had ever seen at once, and walked away. Arnold thought nothing more of it, but that moment would ripple farther than he could imagine. 2 weeks later, something unusual happened. While Arnold was preparing to sing at his corner, Maria came running toward him, clutching a worn-out envelope. Her breath was short, her face pale with disbelief. "Anak, this came for you," she whispered, handing it to him with trembling hands. Arnold looked at the letter. Foreign stamps, bold letters printed across the top, "America's Got Talent auditions." He didn't believe it at first. He thought it was a cruel trick, maybe something he couldn't understand. But as he opened the letter and his mother carefully read aloud the English words, the truth became clear. His video, recorded by that tourist, had gone viral. Millions had seen it, and now the producers of America's Got Talent were inviting him to audition in Los Angeles. For a long moment Arnold just stared, stunned. The weight of the paper in his hand felt unreal. "Mama, is this true? Me, they want me." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Yes, Anak, they heard your voice." Her voice cracked, but she smiled through it. "The world heard your voice." Arnold's chest rose and fell rapidly. His dream, the one he whispered to the night sky, the one he hummed by the window of their shanty, was no longer just a dream, it was reaching back to him. But joy was quickly chased by fear. How could a poor boy from the streets of Manila travel across the ocean? They had no savings, no passport, no clothes fit for a stage. And yet, the letter promised arrangements of flight, lodging, and assistance. It was real, it was happening. That night, Arnold lay awake on their thin mattress, staring at the wooden ceiling. His mother's breathing was soft beside him, but his own heart pounded too loud to sleep. He imagined what America might look like. The bright lights, the towering buildings, the faces of strangers listening to him. It was terrifying, but even more terrifying was the thought of failing, of letting his mother down after coming so far. "Please, God," he whispered, clutching his chest, "give me courage. Not for me, but for her." The days leading to the trip were filled with both excitement and chaos. Volunteers and neighbors who heard of Arnold's opportunity donated what little they could. A second-hand shirt, a pair of shoes slightly too big, coins for small expenses. His mother, despite her frailty, insisted on ironing his clothes and sewing a pocket on his pants. "For luck, you will carry me with you here," she said, tapping the pocket with her thin fingers. Arnold nodded, holding back tears. When the day finally came, he stepped into an airport for the first time in his life. The ceiling stretched higher than any building he had seen, the polished floors reflecting his nervous footsteps. He clutched his small bag tightly, terrified of losing anything. His mother, too weak to travel, waved from the gate, her face both proud and anxious. "Remember, Anak," she called, "you sing for love, not for fame. Whatever happens, you've already made me proud." Arnold pressed his hand against the glass, tears blurring his vision. "I'll make you proud, Mama," he promised. The plane ride was surreal. He had never been so high, never looked down on clouds as though they were pillows spread across the sky. He kept thinking of his mother, of the streets below, of the promise he carried in his pocket. Every vibration of the engine reminded him that he was being carried to something bigger than himself. By the time the plane touched down in Los Angeles, Arnold's legs felt weak. Everything was bigger, the roads, the cars, the buildings. The city hummed with electricity he had never known. He wanted to hide, but he also wanted to stand tall. Producers guided him to a hotel, gave him instructions for the audition. He tried to listen carefully, but his mind was spinning. The next day he would stand on a stage before judges, cameras, and an audience larger than any street corner he had ever sung to. That night he sat by the hotel window, just as he had done back home. The city lights glittered below, stretching endlessly. He pulled the letter from his pocket, smoothing out its creases. His lips trembled, but his voice whispered steady. "This is it, Mama. Tomorrow, I sing for you." The morning of the audition arrived, and Arnold barely touched his breakfast. The hotel staff had brought him toast, eggs, and orange juice, more food than he was used to seeing at once, but his throat felt too tight to swallow. His hands trembled as he buttoned the second-hand shirt donated by a kind neighbor back home. It was slightly too big, but his mother had sewn it neatly, making sure the collar sat straight. As he looked at himself in the mirror, he almost didn't recognize the boy staring back. Gone was the barefoot child of Manila's markets. In his place stood a nervous young singer about to face the world. He pressed his hand against the pocket on his shirt, where his mother had tucked a tiny embroidered handkerchief. "For luck," she had said. He whispered to his reflection, "This is for you, Mama." When he arrived backstage at the AGT auditorium, the sight nearly overwhelmed him. The hallways bustled with other contestants, dancers stretching, magicians practicing tricks, singers humming scales. Cameras rolled everywhere, capturing behind-the-scenes footage. For Arnold it was like stepping into another universe. A producer knelt to his level and said warmly, "Arnold, are you ready?" He nodded, though his knees felt like they might give way. As the stage door opened, a rush of lights and noise hit him. The auditorium stretched wide and high, filled with thousands of faces. The judges' table gleamed under spotlights, 4 figures seated, including Simon Cowell, whose reputation Arnold had only heard whispered in karaoke bars back home. His heart hammered in his chest. For a brief moment, he wanted to run back, to disappear, to curl into the safety of his mother's lap. But then he remembered her words. "You sing for love, not for fame." He took a shaky step forward, then another, until he stood at the very center of the stage. The host leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Arnold, from the Philippines." Polite applause filled the room. Arnold's eyes darted nervously. He had never seen so many people at once, and all of them were staring directly at him. His mouth went dry. Simon leaned forward. "Hello Arnold, how old are you?" Arnold stammered, clutching the microphone. "And why are you here on America's Got Talent?" another judge asked, smiling kindly. Arnold's eyes burned as he swallowed hard. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "For my mom." The audience shifted in their seats. Some leaned closer, intrigued. The judges softened their expressions. Simon nodded slowly. "All right then, we're ready when you are." The music cue began. A simple instrumental backing track. Arnold gripped the microphone with both hands, his fingers white with tension. For a split second, fear froze him. The stage lights seemed too bright, the silence too heavy. He could feel the weight of the cameras, the thousands of eyes, the millions who would one day watch. And then, he remembered the streets of Manila. The way the air smelled of roasted peanuts and dust. The way his mother's tired smile lit up whenever he sang. The way he had promised her he would sing not for himself but for her. He closed his eyes, and he began. The first note was shaky, but then something shifted. His voice, small at first, grew stronger with every breath. It was raw, unpolished but piercingly honest. The words carried the weight of hunger, the depth of sacrifice. A hush fell over the audience. He sang as if the world outside that auditorium disappeared. As if the judges, the cameras, and the stage itself melted away, leaving only him and the memory of his mother listening under the Manila sky. Each lyric rose like a prayer, trembling but true, filling every corner of the vast room. In the second verse, his voice cracked, not from weakness but from emotion. A sob almost escaped, but he turned it into strength, pressing forward. Tears stung the corners of his eyes, but he didn't stop. The notes soared higher, carried by something bigger than skill, by truth, by survival, by love. In the audience, people began wiping their eyes. One woman clutched her chest. A man in the front row shook his head in disbelief. By the chorus, the silence was sacred. Thousands of people sat in perfect stillness, caught in the spell of a boy who had nothing but a voice, and yet was giving them everything. Backstage, producers and crew members leaned toward the monitors, transfixed. One whispered, "This kid, this is the real thing." As Arnold reached the climax, his entire body leaned into the microphone. His small frame shook with intensity, but the voice that came out was larger than life. The final note stretched across the auditorium, long and aching, holding every ounce of love he had for his mother, every prayer he had whispered in the dark, every hardship he had endured. Then silence. Arnold lowered the microphone, his chest heaving, his eyes still closed. For a heartbeat the world held its breath, and then the room erupted. The audience leapt to their feet, clapping, cheering, crying. The sound crashed over Arnold like a wave so overwhelming he staggered backward. He opened his eyes stunned. He had never in all his life heard applause. On the streets people gave coins. Here, thousands were giving him something he had never known: recognition, respect, love. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He bowed clumsily, unable to stop the sobs from breaking free. He pressed the embroidered handkerchief to his face, whispering, "Mama, this is for you." At the judges' table, Simon Cowell sat unusually still, his eyes glassy. He cleared his throat before speaking. "Arnold, you just reminded us what music is really about. It's about life. It's about truth. And you, young man, have all of that." Another judge leaned in, her voice trembling. "I don't think there's a person in this room who wasn't touched by your voice. You didn't just sing a song, you told us your story." The applause surged again. Arnold stood there, overwhelmed, barely able to process what was happening. He had come with nothing but his mother's blessing and a dream. Now, thousands were standing for him. For the first time, he realized, maybe the world really was listening. The theater still echoed with applause, waves of clapping and cheers crashing again and again as if the crowd could not bear to let the moment go. Arnold stood frozen on the stage, small and trembling under the towering lights. His cheeks were wet, his shirt clung to him with nervous sweat, and yet his eyes shone. For the first time in his life, thousands of people were standing. Not because they pitied him, not because they passed him a coin. But because they believed in him. He clutched the microphone with both hands, his knuckles white, as though it were the only thing tethering him to reality. The sound of his heart pounded in his ears louder than the cheers. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable for a moment. Then he leaned forward, resting his arms on the desk, and said slowly, "Arnold, that was one of the most powerful auditions I have ever heard." The audience roared louder, stamping their feet. Arnold blinked rapidly, barely processing the words. English was still difficult for him, but he understood enough. His lip trembled. Another judge, tears glistening in her eyes, leaned toward the microphone. "I have to tell you something, sweetheart. You have a gift, not just a voice. You made us feel. You made us cry. You made us believe in hope again. And that is something the world needs." Whistled, shouted his name. "Arnold, Arnold." The boy staggered back a step, overwhelmed. His vision blurred from tears. Backstage, crew members and other contestants were crying too, clutching their hearts. Then came the moment, sudden, shocking, electric. One of the judges, her face lit with determination, leaned forward and pressed her hand down hard on the golden buzzer. The auditorium exploded. The loud bang of the buzzer filled the air, followed by the opening of a trapdoor above the stage. From the ceiling, a cascade of shimmering golden confetti rained down in a glorious storm, catching the stage lights like falling stars. Arnold's eyes widened. For a second, he thought he was dreaming, or that angels themselves had descended. Golden flakes clung to his hair, to his oversized shirt, to the microphone still trembling in his hand. He looked around, stunned, trying to understand what had just happened. The audience screamed even louder, leaping to their feet, waving their arms, some crying openly. The other judges clapped furiously, some even standing themselves, pointing at Arnold as if to say, "This boy, remember him." Arnold fell to his knees. The weight of the moment was too much. He buried his face in his hands, sobbing not with the sadness of hunger or worry, but with the relief of dreams being touched for the very first time. The judge who hit the golden buzzer rose from her chair and walked toward him, her heels clicking across the stage. She knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Arnold," she said softly, "this is your moment. You don't need to fight for coins anymore. You belong here." He looked up at her, his face streaked with tears. Unable to speak, he wanted to tell her about his mother, about the nights they split one banana, about the promise he made under the Manila sky. But words failed him. His sobs said everything. Simon Cowell's voice carried over the noise, firm but moved. "Arnold, this means you are going straight to the live shows. No more auditions. You've earned your place." The boy's mouth fell open. Straight to the live shows. No more waiting. It was as if the world had opened its doors to him, a boy who once thought opportunity was something only other children had. Golden confetti continued to fall. It clung to his tears, sparkling as they rolled down his cheeks. His small frame shook not from fear now, but from joy so overwhelming it felt almost painful. Backstage, the cameras caught the faces of producers wiping tears. One whispered, "This is why we do this show. To find kids like him." The audience refused to stop cheering. The chant grew louder, rhythmic. "Unstoppable. Arnold, Arnold." And somewhere, thousands of miles away in a cramped little home in Manila, Maria sat in front of an old borrowed television. Her frail body leaned forward, her thin hands clutching a pillow to her chest. She saw her son on the stage, golden confetti raining around him. She pressed her hand to her mouth, sobbing into the fabric of her dress. "Anak, you did it." Her voice cracked, but her smile was radiant. In that instant, the world didn't see a poor boy anymore. They saw a star born from the humblest of beginnings. They saw love in its purest form, shaped into song. As the confetti slowed, Arnold rose shakily to his feet. The judge beside him took his hand, raising it toward the audience. The roar swelled again. Arnold lifted his eyes to the ceiling, whispering silently, "This is for you, Mama." For the first time, he believed his dream wasn't just his. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt forgotten, everyone who had ever wondered if their voice mattered. The golden buzzer wasn't just confetti and applause. It was proof that even a boy from the streets of Manila, singing barefoot for coins, could be seen, could be heard, could change the world. And in that golden storm Arnold's life changed forever. The golden confetti had long settled, but the memory of that night never faded. In fact, it grew, spreading far beyond the walls of the AGT auditorium, beyond Los Angeles, beyond America, all the way back to the crowded streets of Manila where it all began. The clip of Arnold's golden buzzer performance went online within hours. Within a single day it had millions of views. Within a week it had traveled across oceans and languages, translated into captions so that no one missed a single word he spoke or sang. Headlines blazed across news outlets, from the streets of Manila to America's Got Talent. Year-old brings judges to tears. Golden buzzer for Filipino boy singing for his sick mother. Voice of hope, poor child inspires millions. People who had never set foot in the Philippines, who didn't even know where Manila was on a map, suddenly felt connected to a small boy who had sung with nothing but truth. His story wasn't just about music anymore, it was about humanity. Back home, Maria could hardly believe what she was seeing. Their small living room had become a gathering place for neighbors who squeezed in tightly, some standing on tiptoe to see the old flickering television. Children, old men, mothers, all of them leaned forward, holding their breath as Arnold appeared on the screen again and again. Maria sat in the middle, her thin hands trembling as she clutched the handkerchief her son had carried in his pocket on that stage. Her eyes filled with tears every time she saw the confetti fall, every time she heard the judges' voices. But her smile never faded. "That's my boy," she whispered over and over. "That's my Arnold." One of the neighbors wiped her own eyes. "Aunt Maria, he's not just yours anymore, he belongs to the world now," and she was right. Messages poured in from across the globe, people in America, Europe, Asia, all writing about how his voice touched them. A father in New York said he watched the video with his daughter and felt closer to her because of it. A teacher in Kenya shared it with her students to remind them never to give up. A hospital in London played his song in a children's ward to bring comfort to patients. Arnold's voice was no longer confined to a street corner. It was echoing in classrooms, churches, living rooms, and hearts across the world. For Arnold himself, life became a whirlwind. Reporters wanted interviews, fans sent letters, strangers sent donations to help his mother's medical care. For the first time, Maria received proper treatment at a hospital, her medications fully paid for by people she had never met. When Arnold walked down the street in Los Angeles, people recognized him. They asked for photos. Some hugged him, others told him how his voice had made them cry. He was still shy, still overwhelmed, but inside he carried something new: confidence, not arrogance, but the quiet knowledge that his gift had a purpose. He often thought back to his old corner in Manila. He imagined the cracked pavement, the smell of roasted peanuts, the sound of jeepneys honking. It was strange to think of how small his stage had been back then, and how big it had become now. But he never forgot where it started. One night, after another long day of rehearsals and interviews, Arnold sat by the window of his hotel. The glittering lights of Los Angeles stretched endlessly, just as they had on his first night there. He pulled out the same letter that had changed his life, smoothing it carefully against his knee. He thought of his mother, who was finally strong enough to smile again. He thought of the promise he had made. "I'll sing for you, Mama." Now he understood, it wasn't just for her anymore. It was for everyone who needed hope. When the live shows began, the pressure was heavier, but something inside him had changed. He no longer sang just to survive, he sang to inspire. His voice carried the struggles of children selling flowers on the streets, the dreams of mothers working 3 jobs, the silent prayers of fathers trying to feed their families. Every performance became more than music, it became testimony, and the world listened. By the time he reached the finals, Arnold had become a symbol. Headlines no longer called him just a poor boy from Manila. They called him the voice of hope. He wasn't just competing, he was representing millions of children who felt unseen, unheard, forgotten. But the most important moment came not during a performance, not under the bright lights of AGT, but at home. When the season ended, Arnold returned to the Philippines. Cameras followed him. But as soon as he stepped off the plane, all he saw was his mother waiting in her wheelchair, her arms wide open. "Mama," he cried, running to her. "My anak," she whispered, holding him as tightly as her frail body allowed. Tears streamed down both their faces. For a long time they didn't care about the cameras, the crowd, the reporters. It was just a mother and her son, reunited after a miracle. That night, back in their small home, now filled with gifts, medicines, and a sturdy roof donated by supporters, Arnold sat by the window once more. This time, instead of staring out in longing, he looked up with gratitude. The stars above Manila twinkled, and he sang softly to his mother, just as he had always done. But this time, his song wasn't a prayer for survival. It was a song of thanksgiving, of hope, of love fulfilled. Maria listened, her eyes closed, her heart full. She whispered, "Your song reached the world, anak, and it brought us both home." And so it was. The poor Filipino boy who once sang barefoot for coins had become a beacon of light, proving to the world that greatness is not measured by wealth, but by the courage to keep singing when life gives you every reason to stay silent. Arnold's story spread across nations, inspiring countless others to believe in their dreams. But to him, it would always be simple. He sang for love. He sang for his mother, and through that love the whole world listened.